Chapter 313. Early the next morning, Wuming switched the locations of the Shuoyu mansion and the Emiya mansion. As Wuming would be leaving soon, Wuming placed the Shuoyu mansion that Mei Yu was used to living in back in the Emiya mansion so that it would be convenient for the little Lolas to connect. Before Wuming restored the Shuoyu mansion, he informed Julian, "I'm going back to another parallel world. I'm taking Angelica with me." Then before Julian could explode, Wuming slipped away. But there was no need to worry that Shiro Emiya and the others couldn't find Wuming when they returned. Wuming had already told Shiro Emiya how to travel to a parallel world. As long as Shiro Emiya wished, he could travel to a parallel world from the special room in the Emiya mansion at any time. But this didn't mean that Shiro Emiya was a mage. Zelik could freely travel to parallel worlds. This was the benefit of mastering the second method. Apart from that, Zelik could also mobilize the magic power of other worlds and other operations related to parallel worlds. On the other hand, Shiro Emiya relied solely on the equipment that Wuming set up in the Emiya mansion. The two couldn't be compared at all. Not only did Wuming and Zelik have the ability to travel to parallel worlds, but the Ainsworth family also had the ability to travel to parallel worlds. The fact that Angelica and Beatrice came to the Emiya mansion was an example. But according to Angelica, there were huge drawbacks when they used the technology to travel to parallel worlds. Not only did they have to set up a magical formation in advance, but they also needed a large number of worlds to set up the magical formation. The amount of magic power to activate the magical formation was also a problem. Moreover, the effect of the magical formation had a time limit. As Ainsworth used the displacement magic to swap the surrounding space and the same location in the parallel world, the amount of magic power required was huge. This was also the reason why Angelica and the others had come out of the Yuanzhong Mountains. They had borrowed the Holy Grail, which contained a large amount of magic power. With the help of the Holy Grail, the substitution magic was successfully activated. The Yuanzhong Mountain in Elia's world and the Yuanzhong Mountain in Meiyou's world were exchanged, and the two of them successfully arrived in Elia's world. Back then, when Shiro Emiya made a wish, the Holy Grail had used a similar method. Mei Yu and the Yuanzhong Mountain were transferred to Ilia's world, while the Yuanzhong Mountain was transferred to Meiyou's world. This had a similar effect as displacement magic. However, it was permanent because Meiyou's world's Yuanzhong Mountain followed Mei Yu to Ilia's world's Yuanzhong Mountain and never changed again. Ilia's Yuanzhong Mountain had always been Meiyou's Yuanzhong Mountain. The reason why Angelica and Beatrice were able to escape from Wuming's assassination was that Angelica had used the parting sword to directly open a passage to a parallel world and survived. And to be able to accurately arrive at the target world could only mean that Angelica's luck was very strong. The bad ones basically died in the space-time turbulence, and the good ones generally went to the wrong parallel world. This was also why Wuming was experienced with Angelica being able to return safely. To put it simply, parallel worlds weren't so easy to travel. If Wuming didn't have the talent ability to adapt to space-time, he wouldn't dare to travel randomly. But there was no other way. The talent ability of the root dragon to travel between worlds had the adaptability to space-time. Now that he thought about it, this passive ability was really good. After returning to Ilia's world, because it was summer vacation, Mei Yu and the others didn't have to go to school. As a result, Ilia and Blackie came to look for Mei Yu almost every day, along with Ilia's good friends, Eugenza and the others. As for Wuming, apart from studying Pandora's box, he spent the rest of his time happily playing with Mei Yu and the others. He visited the house of Einstein Barons and greeted Mrs. Alice Field, Scylla, Lizlette, Shiro Emiya, and the others. Wuming enjoyed this simple and ordinary life. Then, on this day, Wuming found what he wanted from Pandora's box. Wuming sat in the courtyard. Because he found a clue he wanted, Wuming rejected Meiyou's invitation to go out and play. At this time, Wuming closed his eyes and immersed his mind in Pandora's box. Wuming floated in nothingness. This was the empty interior of Pandora's box. At this moment, there was a trace of destruction in front of Wuming. It was very strange. There was no physical object inside Pandora's box, but now there was a trace of destruction. This is the power of origin. Wuming put his hand on the trace of destruction and softly analyzed. Then, Wuming used his origin power. The trace touched by Wuming let out a light, and shadows emerged from the trace. These are? Wuming was surprised. In an incomparably mysterious place, countless black mud gathered together. There was a little light in the black mud, and the light was pulled out of the black mud by an unknown power. It was visible to the naked eye that it was an infant in swaddling clothes. Then, the infant was sent out of this mysterious place by this unknown power. As if it had lost something important, the black mud surged even more wildly. Soon, the black mud spread out from this mysterious place like a scattered army looking for the infant. Then, a stream of black mud came to a certain world and entered a black box. The item in the box fused with the black mud. Then, after an unknown period of time, the box was opened by someone. Finally, a ray of light shot out from the black mud. Then, the black mud was burned by the sun and completely disappeared. This was the process of the black mud fusing with the disaster in Pandora's box, from the beginning to the end. Like a movie, it was displayed in front of Wuming. After seeing all this, Wuming stopped the transmission of his origin power and let go of the trace. Then, this trace turned into a palm-sized black object that looked like a badge. Wuming fell silent. That infant was undoubtedly Wuming himself. Although he didn't know why, Wuming was very sure of it. And that mysterious place was the source. Although he couldn't see it clearly, there was no doubt about it. The light in the black mud was the hope in Pandora's box, and the one that was burned to death by the sun was Wuming's incarnation of the sun. What is the true identity of this black mud? Wuming muttered to himself in confusion. After thinking for a while, Wuming picked up the item with the black badge. In an instant, the badge attached to the back of Wuming's hand like a maggot, forming a black mark that looked like a dragon-shaped command seal. In the outside world, Wuming opened his eyes, looked at the black mark on the back of his hand, and said solemnly, "Looks like I have to leave this world as soon as possible." Chapter 3:14. Early the next morning, Wuming made breakfast early, used magic to keep it warm, and left the Xiaofan mansion. England. Clock Tower. Outside a room at the top, a purple-black portal opened, and Wuming walked out. As if they were very familiar with each other, Wuming didn't knock on the door, but directly pushed the door open and entered. The first thing he saw was a strong old man with red eyes. After all, they were old acquaintances. Wuming sat on the sofa and spoke directly. "Did you already know that those things had merged with the disaster in Pandora's box?" Unsurprisingly, the world of Mei Yu was about to be destroyed because Ainsworth did something to the black mud in Pandora's box. Wuming didn't believe that Zelik, who solved the crisis of the world's destruction, didn't know about the black mud. "Yes, but it was something that was fated to be with you, so I kept it." Zelik looked at Wuming with his pair of unusually bloody red eyes. Wuming didn't want to be outdone and also used his own red eyes to meet Zelika's eyes. Although both of them had red eyes, Zelika's red eyes leaned toward blood and was quite bloody, while Wuming's red eyes leaned toward gems and were deep and mysterious. "Well, forget it. I'm not here to condemn you this time, I'm leaving." After all, the black mud wasn't a big threat to Wuming. "Are you going to find the black mud?" Although it was a question, Zelik said with a certain tone. "A piece of black mud is enough to cause the destruction of the world. I don't have to say more about the impact of the other black mud on other worlds." Wuming's fingers gently tapped on the coffee table in front of him as he said faintly, "What's more, the black mud has a lot to do with my background." Wuming thought, "I see, protecting the world is the mission of the Origin Dragon?" Zelik said, "In a sense you're right." Then, Wuming stood up and was about to leave. "I can feel that the suppression is getting weaker and weaker," Zelik suddenly said. Wuming stopped in his tracks when he heard that. Ever since Wuming returned to this world, he had not communicated with the suppressive force. This was also one of the reasons why Wuming needed to rely on his own body's power to make a direct change. Wuming tried to contact Alea through the power of Origin, but Alea did not reply to him. Although Gaia responded to Wuming's call, the response was intermittent, as if she was too busy. Wuming had a hunch that something bad had happened to Gaia and Alea, ever since he learned that there were countless black mud going out to other worlds. "Let's go look for the person who is connected to many stars and can resolve this crisis," Zelik suddenly said. "You really have a bad sense of humor, Kit." Wuming turned his head and looked at Zelik with an amused gaze. "Actually, the you in the other world is a clone, right?" Wuming said something shocking. "Although I don't understand the second method, I know that it's related to the parallel worlds. After you mastered the second method, you've already fused yourself from all the worlds, right?" And now, because of the appearance of the black soil, you've learned about me and created an opportunity for me to come to this world. You want to use this to lead me on to the right path, right? Wuming crossed his arms and said calmly. Ha ha ha. As expected of the legendary life form from the big source, Zilik laughed. That's right. I can travel through parallel worlds. When I was traveling through parallel worlds, I accidentally learned about the disaster and your arrival. So, I used the second law to create a clone of myself and placed it in almost every parallel world, waiting for your arrival. Zilik laughed, not embarrassed at being exposed at all. But this also happened to save some worlds that were on the verge of destruction. However, I can't resolve the disaster in that world. The only thing I can do is to seal them in Pandora's box of that world and delay the disaster. Zilik waved his hand. Wuming finally understood that Zilik was a genius who could create class cards. Such a genius couldn't open Pandora's box, and it took him 1,000 years of effort to completely open it. It turned out that Zilik had used the second law to seal Pandora's box. If I'm not wrong, the you in that world is actually your original body, Wuming said. That's right. After all, I've already found you. I've also retrieved the clones in other worlds. You really have a bad taste. Wuming looked at Zilik helplessly. Ha ha ha, isn't this interesting? This old man is having a good time, Zelrich said with a big laugh. Well, in that case, you should know about that world. The world that Wuming was talking about was a world where a large amount of black soil existed. It was the world that Wuming was guided to by the dragon-shaped black command spell in his hand. This dragon-shaped black command spell was actually a signal transmitter that could help Wuming find other worlds where the black soil existed. However, this command spell could also allow the black soil in other worlds to find Wuming. It was also because of this that Wuming chose to leave this world as soon as possible. Of course. I can no longer enter the world with the most black soil. It has completely surrounded the periphery of the world. That's why I chose your help. I can't do anything anymore. Zilik said. However, if it's a small portion of the black soil that invades, I can still resist it. Go in peace. Zilik smiled. I feel like you're implying something. Wuming complained. Didn't you come here to ask me to protect your sister and the others? I'll agree. You make it sound like I'm begging you. Wuming turned his head, opened the door and left. Zilik looked at the door and fell into deep thought. After a moment, Zilik spoke. Where's the origin dragon? He returned to the Shuayu mansion through the teleportation portal. At this moment, Meiyu was sitting on the sofa in a daze, while Angelica was standing beside Meiyu in a maid outfit. Brother Wuming. When Meiyu saw Wuming, she jogged over and hugged Wuming. What's wrong? Why are you so excited? I didn't leave without saying goodbye. Wuming smiled and patted Meiyu's little head. Meiyu lay in Wuming's arms without saying anything. Master Wuming, Meiyu hasn't eaten breakfast yet. Angelica bowed slightly and said, Really, how can you not eat? Wuming pinched Meiyu's little nose. Brother Wuming isn't here. I don't have an appetite. Meiyu blushed as if she was not used to this kind of pampering. Let's go eat together. Chapter 3:15. Then, Wuming proposed to bring Meiyu to the amusement park. Moreover, it was only the two of them. This made Meiyu extremely happy. Although it was not bad to be with Ilya and the others, it was still better to have brother Wuming all to herself. This was not selfish. Every sister would want to be alone with the brother they liked. It was human nature. For the entire day, Wuming played with Meiyu. On the streets at night, Wuming held Meiyu's hand as they walked toward their home. Meiyu, I'm leaving tonight, Wuming suddenly said. After saying that, Wuming easily felt Meiyu's body tremble. However, Meiyu instantly adjusted her body's condition in an attempt to prevent Wuming from noticing. However, Meiyu also knew that how could Wuming not notice? I'm sorry, brother Wuming. I'm still a little. Meiyu lowered her head. She did not dare to look at Wuming. You little idiot. I've told you many times. Don't apologize. Meiyu has nothing to apologize for. Wuming pressed down hard on Meiyu's little head as a punishment. I know. Brother Wuming, stop pressing down on my head. Although Meiyu was complaining, it was obvious from her expression that Meiyu was enjoying herself. I've promised you. It's just a slight delay. I'll be back soon. Wuming smiled. I believe you, brother Wuming. Mei Yu smiled at Wuming. Soon, Wuming and Mei Yu returned to the Shua Yu residence. Arriving at the door of Shua Yu's house, Wuming and Mei Yu entered the room and noticed that there were 2 pairs of shoes in the entryway. They seemed to be primary school-style shoes. Could it be that Ilya and Little Black are here? Mei Yu first thought of her little friends. Most likely. Then, Wuming patted Mei Yu's head. Let's go. Yes. Arriving at the living room, Ilya and Blackie were sitting on the sofa and watching television. There were 2 cups of drinks on the coffee table in front of them. Angelica was standing at the side. Needless to say, the drinks must have been prepared by Angelica. It had to be said that Angelica was becoming more and more like a mature maid. Her use of displacement magic had reached perfection and was of great help to the maid's work. Ilya, Little Black. Mei Yu called out their names and ran over. Mei Yu and Big Brother are back. Ilya stood up. Really? Why did you come back so late? I was bored to death. Seeing that Wuming and Mei Yu had arrived, Little Black instantly laid down on the sofa in an unsightly posture and spoke in a half-helpless and half-coquettish manner. Angelica bowed and reported to Wuming, Lord Wuming, Miss Ilya and Miss Chloe have been here for some time. Thus, when you weren't here, I took the liberty to prepare drinks for them and let them watch television to pass the time. Thank you for your hard work. Angelica, you can go and rest first. Wuming waved his hand at Angelica. Yes. With that, Angelica left the living room. Then, Wuming looked at Ilya and Little Black. Why are you 2 here? Did something happen? Why? Big Brother doesn't welcome us? How sad. After all, I was once a member of this family. Little Black teased Wuming. That, Big Brother, because Little Black and I were worried that you would leave without saying goodbye, so. Ilya's face was a little red. That's why Ilya excitedly pulled me and jogged all the way here. Little Black waved his hand and looked at Ilya helplessly. This is all Little Black's fault. Who asked you to keep saying that Big Brother would leave without saying goodbye? Ilya was so agitated that her face was flushed red. She pounced on Little Black helplessly and started punishing Little Black. Of course, it was just scratching his armpit. Wait a minute. What do you mean it's my fault? Didn't you also want to see Big Brother? However, how could Little Black just sit there and wait for death? He flipped his hand and subdued Ilya. Damn it, I won't yield, Ilya said unyieldingly. Seeing this scene, Wuming and Mei Yu broke out in a cold sweat awkwardly. Mei Yu did it because she also had the same thought. Wuming did it because he indeed had the same thought. All right. Stop fooling around. Since you're here, there's no harm in telling you when I'm leaving. I'm preparing to leave tonight. Hearing Wuming say this, Ilya and Little Black stopped fooling around. Is it that urgent, Big Brother? Little Black was a little surprised. After all, there's an accident. I have to leave this world as soon as possible, Wuming said solemnly. Big Brother, are you all right? Ilya looked at Wuming worriedly. Don't worry. It's just a little trouble. It won't get in the way. Wuming patted Ilya's head to console her. It's fortunate that we came tonight. Otherwise, Big Brother might have left without saying goodbye, Little Black said joyfully. Wuming could only smile awkwardly. But, Big Brother left too suddenly. I don't have any gifts for Big Brother. Ilya touched her trouser pocket a little anxiously. There's no need. It's not like I'm not coming back. I'll solve the problem as soon as possible and come back as soon as possible. Wuming expressed that there was no need to give her any gifts. He made it seem as though he would never see her again. Ilya, you can't do it. It's just a gift. Watch me. Little Black looked at Ilya proudly. Then, she jumped into Wuming's arms and kissed Wuming's left cheek lightly. This prank kiss caused Wuming to freeze awkwardly on the spot. Then, Wuming smiled silently. Isn't this better? Turning around, Little Black smiled and looked at Ilya and Mei Yu, who were dumbfounded and blushing. You, what are you doing? Ilya shouted in panic. Although Mei Yu didn't say anything, her blushing face and lowered head showed that Mei Yu's heart wasn't calm. You can also choose not to give this gift. Ilya, I didn't force you. Of course, Mei Yu isn't the same. Little Black looked at Ilya with a teasing expression. And no! Ilya shouted in panic and instantly threw herself into Wu Ming's embrace. She gently kissed Wu Ming's right cheek and stopped after tasting it. Then, the blushing Ilya pulled Little Black and ran out of the living room.
Wait a moment, Ilya.
Little Black's sorrowful cry could be heard. Wu Ming touched his left and right cheeks that were kissed and smiled helplessly. These little guys, then. Wu Ming noticed that Mei Yu was looking at his cheek. So, Wu Ming looked at Mei Yu. What? Mei Yu wants to do it as well? Wu Ming teased.
And no,
Mei Yu blushed and lowered her head. However, Wu Ming went up and hugged Mei Yu. He kissed Mei Yu's forehead lightly. Brother Wu Ming. Mei Yu was shocked. Wu Ming looked into Mei Yu's eyes and said in detail, "This is a reward for the obedient Mei Yu. I'm very glad that Mei Yu can become my little sister and bring me joy." Mei Yu was very touched. She leaned into Wu Ming's arms with a blissful expression. Me too. I'm very happy to be Brother Wu Ming's little sister. Chapter 3:16. After having dinner with the three Lolas and playing for a while, Wu Ming arranged for them to sleep. At night, Wu Ming stood alone on the roof, looking at the moon in the distance. Usually, someone will come looking for me at this time, Wu Ming said without turning his head. Don't you think so, Gil? As the golden particles appeared, young Gil appeared beside Wu Ming. Are we leaving, teacher? Young Gil smiled gently. Yes, I feel it. Those things are coming. If we don't leave now, we'll be in trouble. Wu Ming was, of course, referring to the high-density black fog, hereinafter referred to as the black mud. Ever since the black dragon-shaped command charm appeared in Wu Ming's hand, Wu Ming vaguely felt that the black mud was moving toward the world he was currently in. Wu Ming was not afraid, but Wu Ming could not and would not allow the black mud to affect Mei Yu and the others' daily lives. Seriously, do you want to come with me? Wu Ming looked at young Gil. Although young Gil had been missing for the past few days, young Gil had more or less learned about the black mud. After knowing that Wu Ming could trace the other worlds where the black mud was, young Gil suggested that he should go with him. Of course. Don't forget, you used to take me to other places to play. Gil smiled. Wu Ming could not help but recall what happened in Uruk. Although the Gil in front of him was not the Gilgamesh Wu Ming met, Wu Ming's experience in each parallel world was the same. In other words, young Gil also had the experience of playing with Wu Ming. But Wu Ming estimated that the adult version of Gilgamesh in this world had different adult memories from the Queen Gilgamesh Wu Ming knew. After all, a man and a woman, their experiences were similar, but they could never be the same. You were very likable when you were a child. Wu Ming recalled and looked at the moon. Well, I also have a headache about what I looked like when I grew up. Why did I become like that? Young Gil looked distressed and looked at Wu Ming helplessly. Maybe this is the king, my best disciple. I think so too, my only teacher. The night continued to deepen, the moon emitted soft and bright moonlight, shining on the master and disciple. The next day, Mei Yu got up early. Mei Yu walked to Ilya and Black's room to take a look. Ilya and Xiao Hei shouldn't be up yet. After that, Mei Yu went to the kitchen and began to prepare breakfast. If it's Brother Wu Ming, he should have left by now. Mei Yu was making breakfast absent-mindedly. After making breakfast, Mei Yu knocked on Ilya and Xiao Hei's door and woke them up. Then, Mei Yu put the breakfast on the table. When the last plate was placed, Mei Yu found a card on the table, which was the style of a class card. It's strange, there's nothing on the table, Mei Yu said doubtfully. Mei Yu had cleaned the table before placing the breakfast. It was impossible to miss a card, and it was a class card. I shouldn't have missed it. Also, could it be that Ilya's card accidentally fell here? Mei Yu knew that he was a little absent-minded just now. Perhaps he had missed something. With that in mind, Mei Yu picked up the class card. Caster Magician? Mei Yu looked at the card that depicted a magician wearing a magician's robe, holding a magic book and a staff, and read the words on the card. However, after reading the rank of the card, the Caster Magician rank card actually emitted a golden light, and the whole card was dyed in gold. This is what the teacher left for you. Suddenly, a child's voice came. Mei Yu quickly turned around and looked at the owner of the child's voice. Gilgamesh. Mei Yu was a little surprised. That's right, It was young Gil. Now, young Gil was sitting on a dining chair, holding a wine glass in his hand, and taking a sip. Because Wuming needed to go back to the route, so Wuming asked young Gil to wait for him here. When Wuming went to the target world, he would summon young Gil. You disappeared for a few days. Why did you appear after Brother Wuming left? Mei Yu asked warily. No matter what, the other party was the most ancient king, the hero King Gilgamesh. Mei Yu was right. Young Gil went to visit this world out of interest, so he disappeared. Don't worry, the teacher asked me to give you that card. This was also why Mei Yu didn't notice the existence of the class card just now. Brother Wuming gave it to me. Mei Yu looked at the class card in her hand, a little stunned. Because the teacher changed the class card, the saver card was too burdensome for you to use, so Wuming chose to seal the power of his caster, magician, class into this empty card. And this card has been refined by the teacher, so it's different from the other class cards. It has supreme power, and the teacher hopes that it can protect you. Then young Gil waved his hand helplessly. You should be content, Hyunryong, who protected the Uruk, protected a little girl. Your value in the teacher's eyes is much more important than the Uruk. Brother Wuming. Mei Yu muttered Wuming's name silently, and tears of joy fell from her eyes. Sigh. Mei Yu, why are you crying? Little Black, who came to the dining room first, saw Mei Yu crying and panicked. Sigh. Mei Yu. Did Jill Kuan bully you? Tell me, I'll avenge you. Ilya, who came one step later, saw Mei Yu crying. She then looked at young Jill who was sitting beside Mei Yu and instantly took out the ruby that refused to come out from her hair. Ruby, transform. Aya, I'm still sleeping. I played games too late last night. Mei Yu is worthy of being from a rich family, and the games she brought are extraordinary. Ruby looked listless. This is not caused by me. Young Gil waved his hand helplessly, and casually took a sip of the wine in the glass. Sapphire came out from behind Ilya and looked at Mei Yu. What's the matter, Lord Mei Yu? Because there was no need to hide, Sapphire did not continue to hide in Mei Yu's hair. No, it's nothing, I'm just too happy. Mei Yu turned around. Although she was crying, Mei Yu showed an extremely happy smile. Sigh. Ilya, Little Black, Ruby, and Sapphire were dumbfounded. Seriously? Young Gil complained, and turned into golden particles and disappeared from the dining room. Teacher really has an ill-fated relationship. Chapter 317. Inside the Root of Origin, the gigantic body of the Root of Origin moved slightly. The dragon opened its ruby-like eyes, and through those eyes, one could see that the owner of those eyes was still a little confused. That was a sign of a delayed spirit conversion. Soon, the dragon's spirit was completely awake. Is it back? Wuming muttered to himself. Because Wuming did not intend to use a servant's clone to go to the target world, Wuming removed his servant's clone, and prepared to use his main body to go to the target world. Wuming looked at his dragon claw, which was engraved with a black incantation similar to a dragon's. As expected, this incantation followed me. Wuming was worried that the incantation would not appear on his main body, but it seemed that his worries were unfounded. Then, Wuming looked at the sparse black mist around him, and a hint of displeasure appeared in his huge dragon eyes. Roar! Wuming opened his huge dragon mouth, and countless bolts of lightning containing the power of origin shot out, instantly destroying all the black mud in Wuming's vision. Just looking at it makes me unhappy, Wuming said in disdain. At that moment, the incantation on Wuming's dragon claw began to glow. The black light was like a sign of death, illuminating Wuming's huge dragon eyes. What's this? Wuming felt as if he was facing a great enemy. Wuming could more or less guess what had happened. Because Wuming came in when there was still a trace of black mud left inside the Root of Origin, the black mud acted like social animals, contacting countless of their own kind to surround Wuming. Coupled with the black incantation on Wuming's hand, the black mud that came to surround Wuming acted like a signal transmitter, and the black mud knew exactly where Wuming was. Perhaps the black mud was wreaking havoc outside the Root of Origin by now. That's good. It saves me the trouble of looking for you. Wuming's dragon eyes flashed with a hint of coldness. The reason why the Origin Dragon was called the Origin Dragon was because it could only unleash its full strength in the Origin Dragon. It could only be said that it was fortunate that the black mud did not have intelligence and did not know how to protect its source. If Wuming had come to the root with a lot of black mud, Wuming would have had no choice but to run. After all, the black mud could also use origin power. The other origins were chaotic, but this one was filled with gentleness. Wu Ming sat on the platform at the center of the root of origin and mobilized all of his origin power. In an instant, the boundless root of origin seemed to come alive and became chaotic. However, there were some sparks in the chaos. In an instant, countless black mud poured in from unknown directions, accumulating more and more. At this time, countless bolts of divine lightning burst out from the origin's chaos and destroyed all of the black mud. The newly arrived black mud also subconsciously used origin power. However, as the saying went, 2 fists cannot fight 4 hands. Wuming, who was in the dominant position, constantly destroyed the black mud. The mindless black mud did not know what a temporary retreat was, and all of them surged forward without thinking. Moreover, even when they began to use origin power, it only added a little burden to Wuming. Wuming increased his output, but the black mud still flew toward the flames like moths. Soon, the amount of black mud gradually decreased until the last bit was destroyed by Wuming's lightning. Despite this, Wuming did not feel at ease. Looking at the incantation on the back of his dragon claw, Wuming knew that the black mud was only a part of the problem. Not to mention the problem of the black mud in the other worlds was also a headache. If they coexisted with the ambitious fellows in the other worlds and received the power of origin power, not to mention reaching the great origin, no one would be able to stop them from doing evil. However, Wuming could not casually go out to deal with the great origin. If the black mud invaded when Wuming went out, Wuming would not even have a place to cry. Although it seemed that Wuming dealt with the invading black mud very easily, Wuming mainly relied on his origin power. If the black mud were to stay inside the great origin and Wuming attacked, Wuming would die like the black mud without even knowing how he died. Of course, Wuming would not be a suicide squad like the black mud. Wuming could still retreat.
If that's the case, then I can only.
Wuming's eyes flashed as he spoke. After a while, after half a day of work, Wuming raised his huge dragon claw and wiped the non-existent sweat. It's done.
Now, it was visible to the naked eye that the great origin's interior was covered with a layer of membrane.
In addition, Wuming's dragon body was covered with countless golden runes. The membrane was a protective measure that Wuming made to prevent the black mud from invading the great origin again. It was a membrane filled with origin power. The golden runes were an automatic technique that Wuming set up. Wuming decided to use his servant's method to go to the target world. When the black mud began to invade the great origin, the membrane would temporarily block it. After all, the black mud also had origin power. Although it could not be broken through instantly, it was enough to block it for a while. And while the black mud was blocked, the automatic technique that Wuming set up would be activated. Like a programmed automaton, Wuming's main body would automatically start to use origin power to deal with the black mud, and it would also automatically repair the damage to the membrane. Even if it did not work, Wuming could still contact his servant's clone and let his consciousness return to his main body. Although he could also split his consciousness, it would cause considerable damage to the mind, and in the long run, he might develop a split personality. Therefore, Wuming did not choose to split his consciousness. Everything is ready. Let's go to the new world. With that, Wuming slowly lay down and closed his eyes. The golden light split from Wuming's body, and just like when he changed classes, a space-time wormhole appeared, and the golden light flew in. And Wuming's main body fell into a deep sleep. A certain parallel world, 1994. Winterwood City, Japan. Near Winterwood City, inside the Great Origin Cave, where the Great Holy Grail was. A magic circle was automatically drawn in the Great Holy Grail's Great Origin Cave. As the drawing was completed, the Great Holy Grail's magic power was injected, and the magic circle lit up. A man wearing a pitch-black raincoat and an old-fashioned European-style black top hat stood in the center of the magic circle. The figure moved his legs in pitch-black leather shoes and walked out of the magic circle. Then he exclaimed, "This is the Great Origin Cave." Chapter 318. Job level, save a real name, Wuming Master, none attribute, lawful, good, ability points, strength, A. Uncertain, durability. A. Uncertain, agility. A. Uncertain, magic power. A. Uncertain, luck. A. Uncertain, relic. A. Uncertain, job level skills. Origin Energy EX. Born from the origin, master the method of using the origin energy. Evil Nemesis EX. Savior, Saver, is righteous. Once identified by the Savior, Wuming, as the evil party and their actions have affected the world, they will be attacked by the world's energy of the same level. The degree of the attack is enough to kill and cause fatal effects. Old skills, Uncertain EX. Has the ability to change one's job level and attributes at will. This is the convenience of being in the origin. Miracle. Has the ability to use relics that do not belong to the current job level. These relics are not assigned to the current job level. Relic, Divine Sword of Salvation, Excalibur, level. EX type, Divine Sword of Salvation distance. Maximum catch. It has the same name as the Sword of the Lake and it has the same appearance as the Sword of the Lake. It is the amalgamation of the Manchala formation. It can be broken down into the Manchala formation. There are countless god relics in it. The Divine Sword has the power to save the world. It can release the lightning of salvation and the light of salvation. 12 powers, God's killer level, EX type, Divine Sword of Salvation distance. 1 maximum catch. 1 There were 12 incarnations of Dragon Seed, Giant, Warrior, Storm, Annihilation, Flood, Vitality, Dependence, Thunder God, Phoenix, Sun, and Magician. Each incarnation was comparable to a noble artifact. It was the upgraded version of the power obtained from killing the gods. Chapter 319. It's Winterwood City, and I was directly summoned by the Great Holy Grail. Wuming looked at the surroundings and said thoughtfully, "That's right, this man wearing a black leather jacket, black leather shoes, and a black top hat was Wuming." The reason why Wuming was dressed like this was because Wuming's current class was Assassin. Is my real name Jack the Ripper? Or is it an accident? Wuming felt his own power and said helplessly. After all, the class selection this time was automatically chosen by the Great Holy Grail. For Wuming, although it didn't mean that it didn't matter what class he was, Wuming wouldn't be troubled by the fact that he was an assassin. In Wuming's view, every class had its own benefits. Even the weakest assassin had its own benefits. Although my combat ability is weakened, it's still good to have my aura blocked. After all, I'm here to investigate, not to attack. With that, Wuming walked out of the Great Hollow of Winterwood City. Even if it was a parallel world, the structure of the Great Hollow of Yuanzhong Mountain was still the same. However, this world was quite strange. Isn't it a little too peaceful? Wuming stood on a high ground and looked at Winterwood City. At this moment, Winterwood City was peaceful. With Wuming's eyesight, although he was an assassin, he could still see the scenery of Winterwood City. At this moment, people were coming and going in Winterwood City. Shops were open as usual, people were rushing about as usual, and students were attending classes as usual. It was very peaceful. Wuming looked at the black dragon-shaped command seal on his hand and frowned. The seal is also useless, as if there's no black mud in this world. Then Wuming turned his head. If I have to say something, it's only because this Great Holy Grail contains a large amount of black mud. However, this black mud doesn't possess the power of Source. It's just pure evil. After Wuming arrived here, he asked Collis to examine the Great Holy Grail. Collis discovered that apart from the pure evil of this world, there was nothing else in the Great Holy Grail. My inspection is flawless. Please don't doubt me, Master. A voice came from the black top hat on Wuming's head. It was Collis' cold voice. Collis was able to change her appearance according to Wuming's class. After all, Collis was the one who changed her appearance into the golden-green dragon horn. I'm sorry, Collis. I'm not doubting you, Wuming apologized with a bitter smile. However, without the black mud, how did the black token bring me here? Wuming was distressed. Collis didn't say anything. She didn't know the truth. Forget it. Let's go check if there's anything special about this world's Winterwood City. After saying that, Wuming turned into a black shadow and disappeared. In a Chinese restaurant, Wuming sat in his seat, waiting for his order. Although Wuming was still wearing a black leather jacket, black leather shoes, and a black top hat. The other people in the restaurant only treated Wu Ming as a weirdo. It didn't affect them much. Soon, Wu Ming's Chinese dishes were served. Wu Ming began to eat heartily. The reason why Wu Ming came back to eat in this restaurant was that he happened to see his own country's dishes in a foreign country. After all, Wu Ming was adopted by an old man in China. Before this, Wu Ming had explored the entire Winterwood city. However, Wu Ming didn't find anything wrong. Soon, Wu Ming finished his meal. No matter how you look at it, it's strange. Wu Ming leaned on the chair and began to talk to himself. Wu Ming, of course, said that there was no special event or trace of the black mud. In any case, the mark on Wu Ming's hand wouldn't lie to Wu Ming, right? The black mud had no consciousness. At this time, a priest came to the restaurant. "Boss, a serving of mapo tofu." After saying that, the priest directly sat at the table closest to the door.
"Master, that person has a sacred mark on his hand,"
Collis suddenly said. Wu Ming took a closer look.
There was indeed a mark on the back of the priest's hand that looked like a blood clot. Only the qualified magicians chosen by the Great Holy Grail could possess such a thing. A master who didn't summon a servant would possess a stigmata, and when the master summoned a servant, the stigmata would become a command incantation. And the priest seemed to have noticed that someone was observing him. He turned his head to look at Wu Ming's direction. However, all he saw was a table full of Chinese dishes and a stack of Japanese yen. There was no one on the chair. Was it an illusion?
The priest was puzzled. But when he saw the mapo tofu on the table, the priest no longer paid attention to that direction. Instead, he focused on the mapo tofu. On the street, Wu Ming pressed down on his black hat and said with some surprise,
"I didn't expect that priest to be so vigilant."
Wu Ming used his assassin's agility to leave the restaurant the moment the priest turned his head. By the way, those Japanese yen were taken by Wu Ming from some rich families. Of course, Wu Ming left some gold as an exchange. According to the information, now should be the time of the Holy Grail War.
"That person is likely to be one of the masters of this Holy Grail War,"
Collis said. Previously, when Wu Ming explored Winterwood City, he found out that the date was 1994. That was the time when the Fourth Holy Grail War began. In Ilya's world, the Holy Grail War was stopped and was never held again. However, it was different in this parallel world. If there were no accidents, the Holy Grail War should be held normally now.
"Collis, I suddenly have a new idea."
Suddenly, Wu Ming smiled. Collis did not say anything. She knew that her master's bad taste was about to start again. Wu Ming came to the big hole in the Yuzhong mountain. Wu Ming took out some materials from his black ripples and began to draw a magic circle. It was the same magic circle as when Wu Ming came to this world. That's right, Wu Ming decided to summon the heroic spirits to participate in the Holy Grail War. Anyway, he had the command seal, Black Mark, in his hand. The only uncertain part is the Holy Grail War. Maybe someone's wish caused the black mud to come, so we have to participate. Wu Ming earnestly said to Collis.
"You're just interested, master."
Collis mercilessly ridiculed. How could that be?
"Isn't this a good opportunity to summon a servant and also summon Gil from Ilya's world?"
Wu Ming smiled.
"Okay, let's begin."
After saying that, Wu Ming took out a clay plate from the black ripples beside him. This was something that Wu Ming had exchanged with Zelik. Wu Ming let young Gil drop the first blood to facilitate the summoning. Fill it up, fill it up, fill it up, fill it up. Cycle after cycle. Then 5. However, when it's full, it's time to abandon it.
"Declare, thou shalt listen to my command, and my life is with thy sword. Answer the call of the Holy Grail. If you are willing to follow this will and this principle, then respond. I hereby swear that I am willing to accomplish all good deeds in the world, and I am willing to exterminate all evil deeds in the world. Thou shalt be the 7 days of the 3 spirits of words, from the wheel of inhibition, the guardian of the Libra."
Following Wu Ming's spiritual words, the magic circle glowed, and a violent hurricane swept everything around it. In an instant, the clay plate in Wu Ming's hand glowed. In an instant, a figure appeared in the center of the magic circle. "Long time no see, Hyun Ryong," said the figure.
"Ah!"
Wu Ming was dumbfounded. Chapter 320. Wu Ming was dumbfounded.
But he did summon Gilgamesh. Looking at the figure that didn't look like a young Gil walking out of the dust, Wuming was silent. Although this Gilgamesh was an adult version, and although he couldn't rule out the possibility that young Gil had used a class card to fuse with himself and return to his adult form, but the Gilgamesh standing in front of Wuming was a woman, and there was no doubt that this Gilgamesh was the Gilgamesh that Wuming met. There was no doubt about it. At this moment, the female Gilgamesh was somewhat similar to when Angelica used the Gilgamesh class card. Her lower body was covered in golden armor, and a red cloak fluttered from her waist. Her upper body was still naked, and the red lines were stuck to the queen's sparkling waist. Her upper body was only covered by a black unlined shirt that could only cover her breasts. Her neck and wrists were adorned with golden accessories, and only one side had shoulder armor and gauntlets. Her ears were adorned with large golden earrings, and her hair was spread out. Her delicate and beautiful face, coupled with her arrogant red eyes looking at Wuming, slowly gave off the aura of a queen. How boring, Hyunryong. Have you fallen to the point of being an assassin? The female Gilgamesh, or rather, the female version, mocked Wuming. Well, although I've thought about summoning other Gilgamesh, at least I still have a trace of young Gilgamesh's blood. Why? Wuming rubbed his forehead with one hand and said rather helplessly. Humph. Just another young version of this king, and you want to compete with this king? Ridiculous. This king has already sent you back to the constellation of heroes. Queen Gil said domineeringly. Forget it. Wuming gave up struggling. After a while, Wuming learned that when Wuming summoned the servant, young Gil did receive the message and was excited to come to this world. However, Wuming got one thing wrong, and that was Queen Sparkle. Although the clay tablet contained young Gil's blood and was suitable for summoning young Gil, the Wuming itself was a very good artifact for the Queen of Summoning, Glint. Even if you came to a parallel world, changed your class, and added a curse, your nature will not change. This king has already made up his mind. This king won't come out even if you don't act as a holy relic to summon him. However, if it's you, no one can win against this king. The queen responded to Wuming domineeringly. No. As expected of my direct disciple. Ahaha. Wuming laughed awkwardly. However, compared to Queen Sparkle or the adult version of Gilgamesh, the young Gil or the old version, the returned king, of Gilgamesh was easier to get along with. The adult version of Gilgamesh's personality was a bit bad. A minute of silence for the poor Gil. Since I've already summoned you, that's it. I originally wanted to summon Gil who possessed a class card, but now it seems that you and I have formed a contract. Feeling that his magic was connected to Queen Sparkle and was supplying her, Wuming felt helpless. Fortunately, my assassin class isn't considered orthodox. Otherwise, I wouldn't be able to pay for your magic consumption. As the top heroic spirit existence, Gilgamesh's consumption was naturally huge. If an assassin were to supply Queen Sparkle with magic, wouldn't it be draining her magic and sending her back to the heroic spirit palace? Humph. It's your honor to be able to let this king come, Hyunryong. Even if you are this king's teacher, you should be proud. Queen Sparkle said proudly. Her small face was shining with unusual happiness. Didn't you say that you snatched it? Of course, Wuming didn't say this sentence. After all, he knew his own disciple. If he said that, Queen Sparkle would be angry again. Gil, you should understand the current situation. Wuming cleaned up the traces on the scene. After all, summoning a servant here couldn't be seen by others. In any case, he had to respect the rules of the Holy Grail War. Humph. Even if it's you, you should call this king king. But seeing that you are this king's teacher's clone, this king allows you to call this king by his name. Queen Sparkle's face was arrogant. She looked at Wuming with a, you can be proud look. That's why it's hard to get along with Jill when she's at her peak. Wuming sighed helplessly. This king has learned the specific situation from another young version of this king. It's about some black mud. With this king here, Hyunryong, you just have to lie down obediently. Wuming didn't say anything about the arrogant Queen Sparkle. Anyway, he had already gotten used to it. It was just that he couldn't get used to it for a while. Now that the black mud hasn't appeared, I suspect that someone used the Great Holy Grail, so I decided to participate in this Holy Grail War. This is also the reason why I summoned you. After all, in order to become a master, one must summon a servant. Therefore, Wu Ming chose to summon young Gil and used the black dragon-shaped mark on his hand as a command spell. If he encountered the other 7 servants and masters, he could just say that he was an extra cheater. As a result, Wu Ming really became a master and occupied a spot. In fact, Wu Ming was worried about whether he would also occupy a spot. After all, he was summoned using the Great Holy Grail ritual. With the Holy Grail's nature, who knows if there would be any accidents? I always feel that if there is an accident, it must be caused by the master. Collis complained. It shouldn't be. Wu Ming was a little uncertain. He didn't find any abnormalities when he came to this world, and the magicians were also very stable. Strictly speaking, he was the abnormal one. Well, since you're already involved, then let's go through with it. Wu Ming smiled, but this smile was particularly gloomy. Collis, I haven't seen you for a long time. At this time, Queen Blink heard Collis's voice and greeted Wu Ming's top hat. I'm deeply honored, Hero King. Collis said very politely. After all, Collis was not Wu Ming. Towards a great king, Collis was still very respectful. Well, now I have to find a place to stay, so it's convenient for the next action. Wu Ming said and began to walk toward the big hole. Then you do well, Hyunryong. This king will be here waiting for your good news. Queen Blink said, turned into golden particles and disappeared. This was the spiritual form of a servant. Not only Gilgamesh could do it, but also Wu Ming could do it. After all, Wu Ming was now in the state of a servant transformed by the Great Holy Grail. Then you stay here first, I'll go to Winterwood City to buy a house. Wu Ming waved his hand. As Wu Ming moved toward the downtown of Winterwood City, Collis' voice came from Wu Ming's head. I always feel that the future is worrying. Chapter 321. At night, Wu Ming brought Gilgamesh to a house. Located in the center of the bustling Winterwood City, it was a nice small villa with a courtyard. This was a place where residents were going abroad. Because they were in a hurry to go abroad, they didn't pack anything. The owner of the house left in a hurry with his suitcase. With Gilgamesh's temper, Wu Ming would definitely say, how can a place where civilians live bear the arrival of this king? Therefore, Wu Ming quickly found someone to decorate it during the day and bought some high-end furniture. This time, he went to the Yuanzong mountain cave to pick up Gilgamesh. You made this king wait for so long. Do you know your crime, Hyunryong? Gilgamesh stared at Wu Ming unhappily. Well, when you get home, be obedient, or I'll starve you. Wu Ming warned Gilgamesh. Humph. You really dare to say that, Hyunryong? Why aren't you hurrying to cook for this prince? Don't make this king wait for too long. With that, Gilgamesh swung his beautiful long hair, left Wu Ming, and walked straight into the small villa. Wu Ming shrugged helplessly, then walked in and began to cook with the ingredients he bought before. At the table, Gilgamesh gracefully tasted red wine and enjoyed the sumptuous dishes prepared by Wu Ming. Hyunryong, the food you make is delicious. Gilgamesh took another sip of red wine and praised. It's good that you are satisfied. By the way, Gil, do you have any wish to make for the Holy Grail? Heh, it's just the Holy Grail. It's mine to begin with. I only joined the Holy Grail War to take back what belongs to me, Gilgamesh responded to Wu Ming's words domineeringly. Yes, Gil is the best, Wu Ming said perfunctorily. What do you mean by that? Are you patronizing this king? Gilgamesh looked at Wu Ming with dissatisfaction. Then what about you, Hyunryong? If it weren't for the black mud, would you have chosen to participate in the Holy Grail War? If it's me, I probably won't, Wu Ming said after thinking for a while. After all, I already have a Holy Grail. Moreover, the Holy Grail that I want to fulfill will not be able to fulfill my wish. Wu Ming smiled indifferently. After hearing Wu Ming's words, Gilgamesh scoffed at the Holy Grail's wish. That's true. That Holy Grail is said to be an omnipotent wishing machine, but in reality, it's not omnipotent at all. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that it's a fake. Wu Ming did not comment on Gilgamesh's mockery of the Holy Grail. Instead, he talked about another matter. By the way, I will go out and investigate the other trainee masters and servants later. I may come back very late. You should sleep first. Wu Ming put down the tableware and wiped the corner of his mouth. Got it. Remember not to lose anything. Even if you are already so inferior, you are still this king's teacher. This king doesn't want to lose his master the next day. Gilgamesh put down the wine glass and said indifferently. But Wuming, who understood Gilgamesh, naturally knew that Gilgamesh was concerned about him. As expected of Gilgamesh, his tsundra nature is very obvious. Wuming squinted his eyes and smiled at Gilgamesh. Are you kidding me? This king is the most ancient king, the hero king, Gilgamesh. Gilgamesh's face instantly turned red. It was unknown whether it was because of anger or because he was pampered. Yes, I know. Remember to put the plate in the sink. I will come back later to wash it. But if you can help me wash it, then I will thank the heavens. Wuming said with a smile. Then, he stood up and walked toward the door. Tisk, you actually let this king do such a thing. What kind of joke is this? Gilgamesh looked at Wuming's back as he sat on the chair angrily. My purpose for participating in the Holy Grail War. Isn't it to see you guys? At this moment, the king's face revealed his human side. Now, the king was living more realistically than anyone else. There was basically no one on the streets at night. Only a few street lamps illuminated the darkness on the empty streets. A stray cat was lying on the chair resting. Suddenly, a black shadow flashed under the street lamp. The stray cat was so scared that it jumped and ran away. Wuming stood on the street lamp and looked at the city. Wuming thought about Gilgamesh. Since he could make Gilgamesh swear that he would not answer unless he summoned, and even snatched the summoning quota from young Gil this time. In addition, Wuming saw the emotions in Gilgamesh's eyes. Wuming smiled helplessly. Looks like Gil's dependence on me has become an obsession. No matter what, this Gilgamesh was just a little girl. Compared to the male version of Gilgamesh, Queen Sparkle still had the gentleness of a woman. Wuming left with Enkidu after Enkidu's death. At that time, Gilgamesh was still grieving over the death of his good friend. In addition, his master had also left. This was a little cruel for Gil. No wonder the history books recorded that Gilgamesh abandoned the Uruk after his good friend's death and began his journey to find the grass of immortality. This was a huge blow to Gil. You're just like Artoria, Gil. Wuming smiled and did not say anything. After all, she was a king. She was not as weak as Wuming thought. Wuming's figure flashed. As an afterimage appeared, Wuming disappeared from the street lamp and began his investigation. The first place to investigate was the overseer of the Holy Grail War, the Holy Church. Wuming did not choose to hide his identity as a servant and directly walked into the Holy Church's Winterwood City branch. As soon as he entered the church, he saw a priest praying to the cross. Of course, this priest was not the Mapo priest that Wuming met before, but a priest who looked old. The priest who was praying heard someone coming in and turned his head. It was a rather old but energetic man. From the marks on his palm, it could be seen that he was a martial artist. According to the results of Wuming's investigation, this quite capable old man was called Yen Fengli. You are a servant? Yen Fengli saw Wuming. At first, he was surprised, but then he calmed down. Is it your master who wants to ask the overseer to answer his doubts? Yen Fengli said calmly. The master had doubts and sent a servant to the overseer of the Holy Church to answer his doubts. This kind of example was not unheard of. Yes, my master wants to know how many servants have gathered in this city, and whether we can start the war. Wuming pretended to be very indifferent and said, So that's the case, can't wait to start the war? Yen Fengli was relieved. There are 4 servants gathered in this city, Lancer, Rider, Caster, and Berserker. Including you, there are already 5 servants. Yen Fengli said. Thank you. After that, Wuming turned into a shadow and disappeared. However, Yen Fengli's face was filled with confusion. The memory just now, I can't remember it at all. Is it the servant's noble phantasm or skill? Yen Fengli was seriously thinking about this strange phenomenon. Chapter 322. Yen Fengli's ability was not bad. He was worthy of being a supervisor twice. Wuming used Jack the Ripper's skill, Intelligence Erase, to erase all the information about Wuming in Yen Fengli's mind. Intelligence Erase B. At the end of the battle including encounter, The memory of witnesses and opponents, recorded information about Jack's ability, real name, and appearance will disappear. But it can't fool scientific products such as cameras. Wu-ming didn't find anything like a camera inside the Holy Church, so Wu-ming didn't choose to use mist to cover his appearance. Instead, he chose to use intelligence erase. Wu-ming left the Holy Church and came to the street. Lancer, Rider, Caster, Berserker, and me, Assassin. Does this mean that the other party didn't notice me in Gilgamesh's archer? Wu-ming stood in the shadow and analyzed what Yan Fengli said. In addition to the 6 of us, there is still Saber with the best attributes. I don't know if she hasn't come yet or if she's hiding. Wu-ming thought for a moment and didn't think about it anymore. Well, in that case, let's leave it at that. For the time being, I can't figure out the reason for this world's abnormality. After a while, Wu-ming returned to the small villa. The house was dark, and the light was not turned on. Bam! Wu-ming turned on the light, and then Queen's voice came. Too slow. Golden particles began to gather on the sofa, and Gilgamesh's figure appeared. You haven't slept yet, Gil. Wu-ming sat next to Gilgamesh and said with a little surprise. What's there to be surprised about? As a servant, this king doesn't need to sleep. But you, this king has been waiting for you to come back. Can't you even say a word of thanks? Gilgamesh said proudly. Indeed, Gilgamesh was right. A servant only needed to enter spiritual form to replace sleep, and as long as there was enough mana or food, the servant could always be active. So, my queen, have you put the tableware on the table in the sink? Wu-ming cast a smile at Gilgamesh. Humph. This king has already taken care of such a trivial matter. Gilgamesh crossed his arms in front of his chest and said rather disdainfully. Then go to sleep. No matter what, girls should go to bed early. Wu-ming patted Gilgamesh's head as if he was treating a child. And Wu-ming was ready to accept Gilgamesh's anger. But Gilgamesh didn't get angry. Wu-ming removed his hand from Gilgamesh's head and looked at Gilgamesh, who didn't do anything. Gil? Gilgamesh looked at Wu-ming and turned into golden particles and disappeared. This is a reward for you. Don't be too proud, Hyunryong. Gilgamesh's voice came from the air and then disappeared. Really, there should be a limit to arrogance. Wu-ming shook his head helplessly and then walked into the kitchen. When Wu-ming wanted to wash the dishes, he found that there was no tableware in the sink, but it was clean. Next to the sink, a few plates and bowls were neatly stacked together. It looked like someone had already washed them. Although the kitchen sink was in a mess, it was obvious that it was done by someone who didn't wash dishes for a long time. Really? Wu-ming laughed. He didn't expect Queen Flash to take his joke seriously. Wu-ming really didn't expect Gil to wash the dishes. However, Wu-ming bet that the male version of Adult Flash wouldn't do that. Only his Queen Flash would be arrogant. Since I have nothing to do, I might as well go investigate the enemy. After that, Wu-ming left the small mansion. Gilgamesh revealed himself and looked at the direction Wu-ming left. He muttered and then entered the spirit state. Boring. The next morning, Wu-ming returned to the small mansion. Gilgamesh came into contact with the spirit state and revealed himself. Did you go to investigate for information, Hyunryong? Gilgamesh returned to her good queen posture and said domineeringly. Yes, information is very important. Wu-ming nodded and went to the sofa to sit down. Humph. You already have this king. What are you still investigating for? If this king wanted, he could have ended the Holy Grail War last night. Gilgamesh also came to his exclusive seat and sat down. It was a rather tasteful and luxurious seat. It was also left behind by the owner of this house. Because he left in a hurry, Wu-ming directly spent money to buy some of the more valuable things. At first, the owner of this house didn't want to buy it. After all, it was also an antique. However, because he was in a hurry and left in a hurry, this seat was successfully traded by Wu-ming at a price that satisfied both parties. Then, it was occupied by Gilgamesh. Although Wu-ming bought it for Gil. Sitting on her luxurious seat, Queen Twinkle crossed her legs and supported her chin with one hand, silently looking at Wu-ming. After all, there is an old saying that goes, know yourself and know your enemy, and you will never be defeated. Wu-ming poured a glass of wine for Gilgamesh and handed it to Her Majesty Queen, who was crossing her legs. So, what information did you find out, Hyunryong? Gilgamesh took the transparent goblet and took a sip. Then, she looked at Wu Ming as if her anger had subsided. You also know that the Holy Grail War was started by the so-called three families. While talking, Wu Ming also poured himself a glass of wine. The three families are composed of the Enosaka family, the Mesotome family, and the House of Einstein Barons. Last night, I explored the local residences of these three families and found two servants. One is a male servant suspected of being a king in the Enosaka family, and the other is a female servant with snake breath in the Mesotome family. After taking a sip of wine, Wu Ming continued. There is no one in the castle of the House of Einstein Barons in Winterwood City. They should have not yet arrived in Winterwood City. Plus, there is a supervisor of the Holy Church. It is inferred that the servant of the House of Einstein Barons should be a saber, swordsman. The servants of the Mesotome family and the Enosaka family are not caster or berserker. As for why I will tell you later, in short, these two should be lancer and rider. Wu Ming put down the glass and then took out a map from nowhere. And here, I found traces of berserker. Wu Ming pointed to the place on the edge of Winterwood City, and that place was the Amiya Mansion. Wu Ming went to the Amiya Mansion with the idea of seeing Shiro Amiya in this world. As a result, he accidentally found multiple magic barriers and traces of berserker. There is no way, a big guy who seems to have no sense of reason can't hide. There is no need to guess, and this is the berserker that Wu Ming knows, Hercules. When Wu Ming found berserker, he was waiting in the courtyard of the Amiya Mansion. Although Wu Ming did not find the master, Wu Ming could almost guess. Magician killer. Amiya Kuritsugu. Wu Ming narrowed his eyes. And then, did you fight with berserker? Gilgamesh shook the glass and asked with interest. Of course not, I just accidentally found the trace of berserker, and then quickly retreated, but the other side should have found me. Wu Ming remembered the guy who wanted to become a partner of justice and could not help but frown. A partner of justice is as cunning as a fox. Chapter 323. Although Wu Ming knew Amiya Kuritsugu from another world, she was a righteous partner, who would sacrifice a small number of people to save the majority of people. Wu Ming sneered. Your smile is really pleasant, Hyunryong, but this king likes it. Gilgamesh praised Wu Ming. Wu Ming reacted and rubbed his cheeks. Is it a negative effect caused by spiritual pollution? Then, Wu Ming continued. I only met these servants once, and then they quickly left me, and I also met Caster here. That's why I judged that the two servants of the Enosaka family and Mitsuhiro family were not Caster and Berserker. Wu Ming pointed to the Winterwood Hotel in Winterwood City. Listening to you, did you fight with Caster? Gilgamesh said. As a king, Gilgamesh could naturally understand the meaning of Wu Ming's words. Well, and the other party is my acquaintance, it's really ironic. Wu Ming smiled sarcastically. Then, why don't you tell me about your ironic experience to help this king pass the time? Gilgamesh casually drank a mouthful of wine and leaned back in his seat. Then, Wu Ming began to recall. After leaving the Amiya mansion, Wu Ming found a street lamp and stopped. I should have thought about it. How can there be no Amiya Kuritsugu in Winterwood City? Wu Ming, wearing a black leather coat and a top hat, stood on the street lamp with his legs straight, looking into the distance. Lancer, lancer, archer, archer, rider, cavalry, assassin, assassin, and berserker, berserker, have all been confirmed. Saber, swordsman, is probably not here yet, so only caster, magician, is left. Then, Wu Ming looked at the Winterwood Hotel, which was the largest hotel in Winterwood City. Basically, some foreigners would stay here. Let's try our luck. Wu Ming's figure disappeared. In the Winterwood Hotel, a man with short blonde hair in his 20s was talking with a woman beside him. It seemed that the two were lovers. Suddenly, blue particles appeared around the two of them, and the blue particles turned into a young man with short blue hair, wearing a classical costume and holding a staff. What's going on, Caster? The man asked. Master, there is a servant coming, and the sensing technique I set up in the distance is working. The blue-haired man said lazily. So, are you sure you can kill the other party? The man with short blonde hair said to kill. It seemed that he was a very arrogant person. The other party is just an assassin, no problem, but I'm afraid that the other party will sneak in. The blue-haired man meant that if the assassin who specialized in dealing with the master sneaked in when he was not there, Then it would be troublesome. Don't worry, I still have the moon marrow elixir. The man with short blonde hair took out a few test tubes with some silver-white liquid in them. That's all right, I'm leaving, master. After that, the blue-haired man disappeared. Is it okay, Kenneth? A woman asked with some concern. What Cuculin meant was that Wuming, as the powerful body of the Dragon of Origin, should not die. I'm not dead, but this time, I participated in the Holy Grail War because I have some things to investigate. Wuming nodded. Oh, so that means it's fine even if I don't obtain the Holy Grail? What a coincidence. I don't need the Holy Grail, but my master does. Although he's quite annoying, he's still my master. I'll help him out a little. Then, Cuculin flashed his staff. Come and fight with me, Sierra. Chapter 324. Wuming finally knew why Cuculin joined the Holy Grail War. This guy simply wanted to fight against the heroes of history. Looking at Cuculin, who was rushing over with his staff raised, Wuming helplessly picked up his weapon as an assassin, 2 unusually gorgeous daggers. Wuming didn't complain about why these 2 daggers were so beautiful. Why would an assassin care about whether the weapon was beautiful or not? Ahem, at least it was easy to use. Wuming swung his daggers and met Cuculin, who was attacking with his staff. Wuming and Cuculin were really 2 weirdos. Originally, they both used guns, but one turned into a wooden stick and the other into a dagger. Needless to say, the wooden stick was considered a long weapon and could be used as a spear. However, Wuming had never used a dagger or similar weapon before. However, bang bang bang, the dagger and the staff collided with each other, making a sound of steel colliding. Wuming and Cuculin's figures were constantly changing, waving their arms at a speed invisible to ordinary people, constantly attacking each other. Wuming usually used a sword or a gun. Although Wuming had never used a dagger, don't forget that Wuming's teacher was the queen of the demon realm, the god slayer who had trained countless heroes, Skaha. Daggers and other short weapons were naturally on Skaha's schedule to train Wuming. Moreover, Wuming was gradually suppressing Cuculin. With a feint, Cuculin escaped from Wuming's entanglement. I can only say that you are indeed my senior. Even after becoming an assassin, your attributes are still not low. Cuculin smiled helplessly. You, on the other hand, have your attributes dropped so much because you became a caster? Wuming held his daggers with both hands and stood not far away from Cuculin. Through the fight, Silent Wonder could clearly sense that Cuculin's strength and durability were quite low, at least much lower than Silent Wonder's current attributes. He estimated that Cuculin's strength and durability were either D or E, while Silent Wonder, as Assassin Jack the Ripper, had strength and durability of C level. Only dexterity can compete with me, and this is because you used the Loon Rune to strengthen yourself. Yes, as the first magic that Wuming learned, the Loon magic, was naturally very familiar with it. Although Wuming didn't use it much, it didn't mean that Wuming wasn't familiar with the Loon magic. As a mere caster, it was impossible for his dexterity attribute to be high enough to reach a level. In addition, Wuming was familiar with the Loon Rune, so he naturally inferred that Cuculin used the Loon Rune. Ah yes, you are indeed my senior. I did use the Loon Rune to strengthen my attributes, but it can only strengthen strength, durability, and dexterity to a level. If I want to fight with you, I can't do it without dexterity. Maybe I will be out of the game in the next second. Cuculin touched his head, not annoyed that Wuming had exposed his secret. Obviously, you were summoned as a caster. Not only did you not ambush in your workshop, but you also wanted to fight me in close combat. I'm really convinced by your muscle head. Wuming said rather helplessly. Well, since my senior said so, then I will fight with you as a caster. Cuculin waved his hand in the direction of Wuming, and a light appeared under Wuming's feet. A rather simple and unadorned rune came into sight. This was the Loon Rune that Cuculin had set up during the close combat with Wuming, and now it was activated. You know I'm your senior. How could I not notice such an obvious trap? Wuming said as he accelerated and jumped away from the light. The moment Wuming left, a violent explosion occurred at the position of the rune. The flames of the explosion spread to Wuming, who had not completely escaped from the explosion range. The flames raged in the atmosphere, absorbing oxygen and burning fiercely. Wu Ming, on the other hand, disappeared into the flames. Of course, this little trick naturally couldn't kill Wu Ming, and Cuculin doubted whether it could cause any harm to Wu Ming. After all, I also appeared as an assassin. This is the beginning of the Holy Grail War. See you next time, Cuculin. Wu Ming's voice came out from the atmosphere, and then disappeared. Under the cover of the flame explosion, Wu Ming's A+ level aura made Cuculin lose sight of Wu Ming. Well, that's it. With that, Cuculin turned into blue particles and entered the state of spiritualization. That's it. I simply fought a few times with the caster and then retreated. Wu Ming put down his glass and leaned on the sofa. Gilgamesh, on the other hand, looked at Wu Ming with interest. I didn't expect the caster to be your junior. Then again, this junior is related to your identity in other myths. I haven't heard that the Uruk Hyunryong has a junior. Because of interest, Gilgamesh began to shake his legs. Looking at Gilgamesh's shaking legs, Wu Ming said that he couldn't see anything from the armor, so he simply stopped looking. After all, I'm also a traveler. It's not surprising that I know people in other areas. Wu Ming said casually. So, do you have a plan? Gilgamesh asked. Gilgamesh didn't believe that Hyunryong, who had investigated almost all the enemies, didn't have a plan. The Uruk Hyunryong's reputation was not only obtained by protecting the people. As the closest person to Hyunryong, Gilgamesh naturally knew that Hyunryong had a very high strategy. Moreover, this time Wu Ming appeared in the world as an assassin. Wu Ming, who didn't have the ability to break through, would definitely choose to use wisdom. However, this time, Gilgamesh guessed wrong. I didn't prepare a plan, I just simply investigated the enemy. Wu Ming waved his hand tiredly. After all, you said that if you wanted to, you could end the Holy Grail War in one night. The key is that there's no need at all. Wu Ming smiled indifferently as he leaned on the sofa. After Wu Ming finished speaking, Gilgamesh frowned. What do you mean? Gilgamesh asked. Do you still remember why I came to this world? Wu Ming hinted. Gilgamesh suddenly realized. After all, Gilgamesh came to this world in the form of occupying a spot in the Holy Grail War. It was inevitable that he would pay a little attention to the Holy Grail War. I almost forgot. You came to this world because of that strange black mud. Yes, Wu Ming's original purpose was the black mud with origin power, and he participated in the Holy Grail War only because Wu Ming hadn't discovered the black mud for the time being. Therefore, he suspected that there was something fishy about the Holy Grail War, so he participated. In other words, I just have to wait quietly, wait for the final victor, and then investigate the truth about the black mud. Chapter 325. Of course, although Wu Ming said that he would wait quietly, Wu Ming wasn't someone who could just sit around and do nothing, and neither was Gilgamesh. Therefore, Wu Ming brought Gilgamesh to the amusement park. Well, amusement park. Important things must be said twice. Gilgamesh looked like he was holding back his anger, looked at the amusement park in front of him, then looked at the smiling Wu Ming and said, You actually let this king come to a place for children. You really have guts. Do you think this king is a child, Hyunryong? However, Wu Ming just waved his hand. What does it matter? After all, I watched you grow up, and I can be considered your adoptive father. What's wrong with a father bringing his daughter to the amusement park? Wu Ming said seriously. Of course, it would be perfect if Gilgamesh didn't stop him from opening the gate of Babylon. Wu Ming held down Gilgamesh, who was about to open the gate of Babylon, and smiled. Ma, Gilgamesh. Just treat this as playing with me. You can also experience the feelings of the people while you're at it. Besides, you've never been to an amusement park before, right? Wu Ming calmly advised, not at all worried that Gilgamesh would pull out his sword and stab him. Humph. Seeing that you are my teacher, this king will accompany you. Gilgamesh shook off Wu Ming's hand that was pressing down on her arm, with a, I'm being merciful, come and thank me look on her face. Yes. Thank you for taking the time to accompany me to experience the people's feelings. In Wu Ming's view, Gilgamesh wasn't angry at all. The gate of Babylon only needed Gilgamesh's consciousness to open. Raising his hand was just a habitual action. In other words, even if Wu Ming was holding Gilgamesh's hand, Gilgamesh could still open the gate of Babylon if he wanted to.
This showed that Gilgamesh wasn't angry. Then, please change your clothes. After all, your current appearance is not suitable for experiencing the people's feelings. Wuming pointed to the people around him. They looked at Gilgamesh as if they were looking at a girl who liked to cosplay. In order to avoid trouble, Wuming had already changed his clothes into ordinary casual clothes. He was wearing a white shirt, a black jacket, black pants, and a pair of casual shoes. He wore a cap on his black hair, and his red eyes were emitting a captivating light. This light was deep and distant, and it was quite attractive. He looked quite handsome. Gilgamesh, on the other hand, was still wearing his golden armor, exposing his abdomen. Although it was reasonable to dress like Gilgamesh at the entrance of the amusement park, everyone's attention was still on Gilgamesh's supreme appearance. As a person with 2/3 divinity and 1/3 humanity, Gilgamesh was naturally blessed by the gods. His IQ, appearance, and so on were not comparable to ordinary people at all. Thinking about young Jill, he had a skill called Beautiful Boy in his attribute. Beautiful Boy. Said he was a display of the skill of a beautiful young man that made people want to protect him. Although it had a magic effect that could charm people regardless of gender, it could be avoided by magic skills. Even if there was no magic resistance, the effect could be mitigated if there was resistance. Although Beautiful Boy's skill was only C rank, having this skill meant that his appearance was heaven-defying. And the effect could be said to be even more effective on Shiny Girl. At this moment, it was not an exaggeration to say that Gilgamesh was a peerless beauty. These mongrel cultivators, bastards. How dare they look straight at this king? Gilgamesh seemed to be really angry. Forget it, after all, it's just to experience the people's feelings. It's not like they will lose a piece of meat. By the way, it's better to quickly change your outfit, so that you can avoid trouble. Wuming comforted Gilgamesh. After all, if Gilgamesh felt humiliated and took out his sword, then they would be finished directly. That's true. I'll do as you say today. Gilgamesh's body began to emit light. Gilgamesh wanted to change his outfit here. After Wuming saw it, he directly pulled Gilgamesh and ran away. When the passers-by saw the blonde beauty's boyfriend pulling the beauty away, they only felt a little regretful that there was no beauty to see. Then they began to busy themselves with their own things. A moment later, Gilgamesh and Wuming returned to the entrance of the amusement park. Why does this king have to hide and change his outfit? This king is the hero king, Gilgamesh. If he wants to hide, it should be these bastards. Gilgamesh said unhappily. After all, Wuming suddenly pulled Gilgamesh's hand. Wuming was still wondering why Gilgamesh did not get angry, but now it seemed that his anger was delayed. Well, don't forget the hidden rules of the Holy Grail War. Just put up with it. Wuming wiped the non-existent cold sweat. Gilgamesh looked at his hand that was pulled by Wuming, and then looked at Wuming in a good mood. This king forgives your rudeness. Then, as if he thought of something, Gilgamesh looked at Wuming slyly. So, Hyunryong, what do you think of this king's outfit? Gilgamesh said as he moved closer to Wuming. Wuming looked at Gilgamesh's current outfit. The upper body was a white shirt with a black woman's jacket, but it still could not hide the queen's towering breasts. The lower body was a short skirt, black silk stockings, and a pair of high boots, which showed off the queen's slender legs. Long golden hair without any impurities was casually spread out and draped over her back. Her beautiful face was breathtaking, and her red pupils, similar to Wuming's, exuded a lofty arrogance. She had the proper queen's style. However, aren't you wearing the same type of clothes as me? Wuming was slightly puzzled. The two of them were dressed like a couple, and with their red pupils, if it were not for their different hair colors, they would be siblings or siblings. What's wrong with that? You're my teacher. There's nothing wrong with wearing the same clothes as my teacher. Gilgamesh frowned slightly, and a trace of displeasure appeared on his peerless face. That's not a big deal, but the problem is that it's even more eye-catching now. Wuming said helplessly, and pointed at the crowd around them. Gilgamesh looked around, and realized that the people who were busy with their own things had all stopped what they were doing, and were staring blankly at Wuming and Gilgamesh. To be precise, they were looking at Gilgamesh alone. This group of mongrel cultivators, trash. In an instant, golden ripples appeared, and countless relics appeared. Wait. Wait a minute. Wu Ming's panicked voice resounded through the sky. Chapter 326. In the amusement park, Gilgamesh walked while licking his ice cream, while Wu Ming followed Gilgamesh with a tired face. At the entrance of the amusement park, Wu Ming stopped Gilgamesh's noble phantasm and used a simple hypnosis magic to hypnotize everyone at the scene and erase their memories. Then Wu Ming cast a simple magic to reduce his presence on Gilgamesh and quickly ran away with Nyang Shanshan. Although Wu Ming, as Jack the Ripper, shouldn't be able to use magic due to his class, but he couldn't stop Wu Ming, the cheater. The servant's body was Wu Ming's avatar in the Great Source. All the noble phantasm was on the main body, and the noble phantasm on the servant's body was only the avatar of Wu Ming's noble phantasm. The assassin class was because the Great Holy Grail captured Wu Ming's adaptability to that class, so it recreated Jack the Ripper's noble phantasm. But because of Wu Ming's cheating, the power of Source, Wu Ming's Jack the Ripper was not pure Jack the Ripper, but a new version of Jack the Ripper that was mixed with some other things. That was why Wu Ming's assassin class had some attributes, skills, and noble phantasm that didn't belong to Jack the Ripper. However, cheating on a large scale was not advisable. Even if it was Wu Ming, he couldn't violate the rules of the servant class too much. Therefore, Wu Ming cheated a little, so that Jack the Ripper, who originally couldn't use magic, could use some small magic. Needless to say, the magic of dispel, suggestion, and reducing one's presence was really useful. After that, Wu Ming bought an ice cream for Jusama to comfort Jusama's dignity. Gilgamesh, who was walking in front, looked at Wu Ming, who was quite tired, thought for a moment, and threw the ice cream in his hand behind him. Naturally, Wu Ming was able to react in time and caught it in one go.
Gil, what are you doing?
Wu Ming looked at the ice cream somewhat puzzled. This king has decided to reward you properly. I'll leave the leftover ice cream to you. Gilgamesh swung his elegant blonde hair and said in a tone that brooked no refusal. Ha! Are you kidding me? Wu Ming looked at the half-melted ice cream helplessly.
What, you're not satisfied?
Gilgamesh turned around and stared at Wu Ming with her beautiful red eyes. Wu Ming's eyes revealed the meaning of, if you say no, you're done for. How could that be? Wu Ming scratched the back of his head awkwardly. Humph. Then, is there anything for this king to play? Gilgamesh snorted, turned her head, and scanned the entire amusement park. Wu Ming thought for a moment, then proposed. Since you, Gil, haven't played before, then let us all experience it. Well, let this king see what's so attractive about these boring devices. With that said, Gilgamesh took Wu Ming's hand and walked towards a certain project. The sign in front of them had the words roller coaster written on it. Wait a minute, don't pull me. Shut up. This is your punishment for pulling this king's hand just now. Yes, your majesty. On the roller coaster that had already started, Wu Ming enjoyed the cool breeze brought by the roller coaster and couldn't help but think of Mei Yu and the others. He still remembered when Wu Ming brought Mei Yu, Ilya, and Little Black to the amusement park to play. Ilya and Mei Yu were instigated by Little Black and were half forced to play on the roller coaster. As a result, when the roller coaster started, Ilya was so scared that she cried and screamed. Mei Yu was fine, but her face was also pale. In the end, during the roller coaster ride, Ilya and Mei Yu gradually got used to it, scaring Little Black quite a bit. Looking at Wu Ming's smiling face, Gilgamesh, who was sitting with Wu Ming, frowned but didn't say anything. After that, Wu Ming and Gilgamesh tried the various projects in the amusement park one by one. In the blink of an eye, it was already afternoon and the amusement park was closed. Because the two of them came at noon, there wasn't enough time. At the entrance of the closed amusement park, Wu Ming looked happy as if he was reminiscing about the past. Gilgamesh, on the other hand, looked bored. Those things are only suitable for civilians to play. Like the roller coaster, that speed can't even compare to Vimana. I really don't know what's there to be happy about. Hearing Gilgamesh's complaint, Wu Ming, who was walking side by side with Gilgamesh, looked at Gilgamesh. Well, Gil is the hero king. It's normal for him to be bored by these projects. To be honest, compared to the exciting facilities in the amusement park, combat can stimulate Gilgamesh's desire more. This is a fact. Gilgamesh, who has fully adapted to combat and surprise attacks, can't feel excited by the amusement park's projects. Although that's true, but Gil was also scared in the haunted house before. Wu-ming smiled mischievously. Because he saw that Gilgamesh didn't care much about the projects, Wu-ming used the opportunity to enter the haunted house to personally scare Gilgamesh. It can only be said that Gilgamesh still has the weakness of a young girl. Although Gilgamesh only frowned at the time, but from the release of the Gate of Babylon, it can be seen that Gilgamesh was really scared at that time. Cheap joke. This king is particularly annoying, Gilgamesh said proudly. Well, experiencing all kinds of emotions, this is what a king needs to do. Didn't I teach you? Wu-ming smiled, then pulled Gilgamesh's hand. Let's go home and prepare an unprecedented feast for our long-awaited disciple. Humph! For you to hold this king's hand without permission, this king will not care this time, but if this dinner tonight is not to this king's liking, then you are finished, Hyun-ryong. Yes, I know, let's go, my king. The setting sun shone on the man and woman. The two people's shadows were getting longer and longer, farther and farther. At night, Wu-ming turned into a night walker and shuttled through the streets. Soon, Wu-ming stopped at the house on the side of the street. Because Wu-ming felt a battle intent, that's right, that's the battle intent of a servant. Suddenly, on the top of the building where Wu-ming was, on the street lamp beside the house, golden particles appeared, and Gilgamesh, who had recovered his golden armor, appeared. It's just a hyena's howl. Why do you want to go? Gilgamesh said rather disdainfully. It's not too much to go and have a look. The last saber swordsman is probably here. This battle intent is probably the invitation sent by saber swordsman. I'm very interested. Wu-ming pressed his top hat and said calmly. To be able to see a good show, this king doesn't mind being a spectator for once. With that said, Gilgamesh turned into golden particles and disappeared in spirit form. Wu-ming activated the aura barrier and quickly went to the place where the battle intent originated, Winterwood Beach. Chapter 327. Wu-ming activated his aura block and hid near the beach, while Gilgamesh hid behind a street lamp in his spiritual form. Wu-ming looked at the center of the beach. There was a blonde woman in black armor with a black mask on her face and a black holy sword in her hand. There was no doubt that this was Saber, swordsman, but it was still someone Wu-ming was familiar with. Artoria. Wu-ming frowned. Although Saber did not match Artoria's attribute, dark, but whether it was the dark holy sword in her hand or the familiar face under the mask, it all proved that she was indeed the Artoria he knew. It can't be wrong. That is Artoria. After carefully examining the dark holy sword in her hand, Wu-ming confirmed. But how did Artoria become like that? Wu-ming felt a little sad. Artoria was Wu-ming's first disciple, and Wu-ming liked this little girl, especially compared to the current Gil. However, the Artoria who appeared in front of Wu-ming at this moment was exuding a strong dark aura, and Wu-ming did not find anyone else around Artoria. Wu-ming suspected that Artoria's dark was caused by the destruction of her country. Wu-ming had checked, and with the British silver dragon, which was the historical record of Wu-ming's Britain, Artoria's country was destroyed in the end. With Wu-ming in Britain, the people lived and worked in peace. However, because of Wu-ming's disappearance, although Artoria did not send out knights to search for the Holy Grail like crazy, she still sent out a lot of knights. The knights who cared about Wu-ming were also very willing to search for the Holy Grail. However, due to Wu-ming's departure, Merlin's being trapped in Avalon, he deserved it, and Artoria's lack of power, the ambitious dukes began to target Artoria. Because of Guinevere's longing for Wu-ming, Morgan and the nobles used this as a fuse to put Guinevere on trial. After all, that era did not allow someone like Guinevere to exist. With the nobles as the leader and the church's support, the trial for Guinevere was carried out. Although the Knight of the Lake, Lancelot, forced the princess to escape, Guinevere, who was condemned, came back and was willing to be punished. Artoria was exhausted and could not go against the era and the rumors of the people, so she had no choice but to burn Guinevere at the stake. The historical records were not very detailed. Lancelot robbed the execution ground and fought with a few remaining knights. Although he managed to escape, he was severely injured. The other knights suffered the same fate and suffered heavy casualties. The knight's faith, the departure of the British silver dragon, the disappearance of the Archmage Merlin, Artoria's inaction, Morgan's secret instigation, Guinevere's incident, the Knights of the Round Table killing each other, and the disappointment in the king. All of these led to the destruction of Britain. Artoria's expedition to Rome led to the rebellion of the knight Mordred,
and the conspiracy of the nobles led by Morgan led to the Battle of Camlin. Originally, Silent Wonder thought that Artoria had turned into a dark form because of this, but it turned out that this was not the case. The thick darkness that clung to Artoria's body was like the evil of this world in the Eastwood Holy Grail. That's right. Wuming had previously investigated the interior of the Holy Grail in Winterwood City. The magic in the Holy Grail had all turned into the evil of this world, and its form was some black mud. Artoria's body was full of the evil of this world as if she had been soaking in it for a long time.
What the hell is going on? Does it have something to do with the Great Holy Grail in Winterwood City?
After all, Wuming was an assassin without magic, so Wuming did not set up any detection spell in the Great Holy Grail in Winterwood City. However, Wuming had been checking the Great Holy Grail from time to time for the past 2 days. After all, the evil of this world in the Great Holy Grail was also a threat to Winterwood City. If it was released, it would be troublesome. Wuming became serious when he saw Artoria's dark form.
It seems that I have to check the Great Holy Grail later, Wuming thought. At this time, Artoria, who was standing on the beach, opened her mouth. You're here, you rascals. Since you're here, don't hide. You'll lose the chance to fight me.
I, the Night King Artoria Pendragon, disdain to be associated with you.
Sure enough, it's Yulia. Wuming was completely sure when he heard Artoria's voice.
Artoria said something that was unclear, but Wuming knew one thing, that was, Artoria was trying to anger the servants who had come to the beach. In Wuming's perception, including Artoria and Wuming himself, there were a total of 7 servants here. That was why Artoria was provoking them. It seems that Artoria wants to kill everyone in one go.
She's quite arrogant, just like Gil.
Wuming smiled and looked at Artoria, who was standing in the center of the stage.
So, who will show up for King Arthur's provocation?
Wuming waited with interest.
So that's how it is, the famous King Arthur? Then, I can't lose my reputation. Accompanied by a deep voice, a brown figure appeared. The clothes of the West Asian style looked particularly cool. A pair of decorative horns were worn on his head. His strong facial features and strong physique showed that this person was strong. I'm also a king. This time, I'm here as a rider. Please advise me, Spare.
The muscular rider was quite polite.
He was not arrogant like the other kings. Are you the only one, rider? Are the others just cowards?
Artoria shouted loudly to provoke the other servants who were hiding. And it seemed that Artoria's provocation worked.
Humph.
In just one night, there were 2 more mongrel cultivators, scumbags, proclaiming themselves kings.
You really don't put this king in your eyes.
Gilgamesh removed his spiritual form and showed his figure, standing on the street lamp and despising Artoria and Ryder.
I can't continue to hide.
A rather frivolous voice came, blue particles condensed, and Cuculin appeared wearing a sage robe.
Yo, I'm Castor. Here at Saber's call.
Looking at Cuculin's sloppy appearance, Wuming helplessly touched his forehead.
I knew it would be these 2 who would come out.
After all, Gilgamesh's dignity did not allow others to provoke him again and again.
Plus, the 2 kings provoked Gilgamesh, the only king. Gilgamesh would naturally show up. And Cuculin did not show up in the first place.
Wuming guessed that it had something to do with his master. Of course, as a caster, his mind calmed down a little.
It's quite interesting.
Let's not talk about Assassin and Berserker.
Lancer also doesn't show up? Anyway, there are 3 knights.
Artoria said without arrogance.
Thank you. Chapter 328.
Thank you for your respect. A relaxed lowly voice was heard. A young girl wearing a cloak and holding a scythe in her hand came out of spiritual form and appeared in front of everyone. The large cloak covered most of the girl's delicate body. Her long purple hair was braided behind her head, and the front part of her long hair casually hung down from the cloak. Although the cloak covered most of the girl's body, one could still vaguely see the girl's petite body. It was not an exaggeration to say that she was a young girl.
Oh, Lancer. It's a little girl. Are you interested in a cup of tea?
It could only be said that Cuculin was really good at flirting with women. After all, Cuculin was still Cuculin. Whether it was a Lancer or a caster, he would not change.
Please allow me to refuse, pervert. Lancer refused without hesitation. She made a clear voice like a newborn baby. Very good, except for Berserker and Assassin. Is everyone here? Artoria nodded with satisfaction and put her hands on the invisible holy sword in front of her. Well then, let us decide the victor tonight, heroes. After that, Artoria suddenly released her magical power. The surging magical power overturned the sand on the beach. It looked quite domineering.
You really dare to say that, Saber?
Cuchulain said, not to be outdone. But it's not a bad idea. Ryder crossed her arms in front of her chest and said rather sullenly. Humph. Gilgamesh did not say anything. He just looked down with a look of amusement. Lancer, on the other hand, was silent. Apparently, she agreed with Spare's proposal. That's right, it saves us a lot of trouble. Are you here, assassin? Come out and fight with me.
I know you can't be restrained by a mere assassin.
Cuchulain shouted to the surrounding.
The other servants seemed to be interested in the assassin, and were not in a hurry to start a fight.
Seriously, this idiot, is it because Sierra remembered me? Wuming, who was hiding in the dark, said with a headache. After Wuming left Cuchulain, the intelligence array skill was indeed activated. Cuchulain did not remember any information about Assassin. However, this did not stop Cuchulain from knowing Wuming's other identity. He was the eldest disciple of the Queen of the Demonic Realm, Cuchulain Sr., the Warrior of Connaught, and the Tyrannosaurus of Queen Maeve. Information erasure only targeted information about Assassin, which meant that it targeted information about Jack the Ripper. Because Cuchulain had seen Wuming before, even if he lost any information about Jack the Ripper, he still knew that Assassin was his senior. It was the same as Wuming knowing that Castor was Cuchulain. Both sides only remembered the information of the other side when they were holding guns. For now, both sides only knew who the other side was. Of course, Wuming, who had learned the Loon magic trick, naturally had an advantage over Cuchulain. After that, Wuming also lost interest in continuing to hide. He gently jumped and revealed himself. You are really an idiot, Castor, Wuming complained. Ha ha ha, anyway, I am very satisfied to be able to fight with you. Cuchulain was not angry, but laughed and looked at Wuming full of fighting spirit. So, let me introduce myself first. I am Jack the Ripper. This time, I came here as an assassin. Please advise me. Wuming did not pay attention to Cuchulain. Instead, he introduced himself and even exposed his real name. Ryder frowned as if he was not satisfied that a murderer could be on the same stage as them. However, after thinking about it, he was an assassin after all. It could be said that his courage was commendable. Although I admire you directly, it is undoubtedly extremely stupid for you to expose yourself as an assassin, Ryder said dully. As for the others, Lancer did not speak much at the beginning and did not say anything. Gilgamesh was very dissatisfied with Ryder's evaluation of Wuming, and looked at Ryder with murderous eyes. As for Artoria, since Wuming appeared, she fell into silence. So, you are the assassin of this Holy Grail war, Artoria said without understanding the meaning, but she had been staring at Wuming with a complicated look. Wuming certainly knew why Artoria was looking at him like that. Without thinking, Artoria also recognized his identity. That saber over there, he's this king's possession, teacher. Put away your invasive gaze. Gilgamesh saw that Artoria's eyes were a little strange when she looked at Wuming, so he said rather grumpily. Is that so? Archer, although I don't know how you came to this conclusion, but he is my possession, knight. Artoria stared at Gilgamesh, and Gilgamesh did not show any weakness and stared back at Artoria. Hey, what's going on? Why do I feel that Saber and Archer are about to fight because of you? Cuchulain said jokingly. Wuming's response was only silence.
Could this be the legendary Shiraba? Wuming thought with some uncertainty, and he even swallowed a mouthful of saliva.
It's none of your business, Castor. Do you want to leave as soon as possible? Wuming stared at Cuchulain fiercely. However, Cuchulain picked up his staff and spun it twice. I can't wait. Then he looked at Wuming full of fighting spirit. As a last resort, 2 daggers suddenly appeared in Wuming's vertical hands, which slipped out from Wuming's sleeves. Then let me teach you a good lesson. On the other side, Lancer looked at Ryder, who was now vacant. What, do you want to fight me? Ryder looked at Lancer calmly. And at this moment,
Rustle! 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 A roar that did not seem to be human came. Holding a strange stone weapon that looked like an axe and a knife, the 3-meter-tall little giant roared and jumped into the beach. Rustle! 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 He roared again, turned his eyes to Lancer and rushed up. TSK, the hero who killed the monster and the monster who was killed by the hero were swapped. How ironic, Lancer said softly and rushed up to Berserker. I say, aren't you guys looking down on me a little too much? In an instant, Ryder jumped fiercely and instantly jumped between Berserker and Lancer. Lancer was rational enough to stop, but the irrational Berserker would not do the same. Berserker raised the axe in his hand and slammed it down toward Ryder. Looking at the way his muscles were tied, he must be a servant with high strength or even monster strength attribute skills. Ryder would be injured if he did not die. But, clank! A long bone stick like an elephant's trunk stretched out from the ground and blocked Berserker's attack. Rustle! Rustle! Berserker roared angrily because his attack was blocked. As expected of the irrational Berserker. In fact, I'm more suitable for this class, Ryder said lightly. Then, the bone colossus swung its trunk and flung Berserker away in an unbelievable manner. Then, Ryder looked at Lancer, and Lancer raised her scythe vigilantly. Since I can't fight with my old enemy, I'll fight with you guys. Ryder showed a tyrannical smile. His dark face revealed his big white teeth. Looking at the Berserker's smile, Lancer seemed to know why Ryder said that he was suitable for the Berserker class. Chapter 329. The timeline was pushed back to the day. Enosaka House. The manager of Winterwood City, Enosaka Toshiomi, elegantly held a glass of red wine with one hand behind his back. He stood in front of the window and looked into the distance. His eyebrows were full of haze. On the back of his hand that was holding the red wine, 3 scarlet incantations were engraved like mysterious circles. Knock knock. There was a knock on the door. Please come in, Enosaka Toshiomi said. Creak. The door opened with the sound of the door opening. A young priest walked in. If Wu Ming was here, he would definitely recognize him. He was the priest that Wu Ming met at the Chinese restaurant that day. His name was Yen Fengkiri, the son of the old priest that Wu Ming met at the church in Winterwood City. Kiri, what's the matter? Enosaka Toshiomi turned around and looked. The haze between his eyebrows disappeared a lot. Sensei, a suspected servant was found near Tabaki Amusement Park. Yen Fengkiri said very respectfully. Is it confirmed? Enosaka Toshiomi said seriously. Yes, according to my father's information, it is currently confirmed to be Archer. It is very likely to be a king. Yen Fengkiri said carefully, afraid to make his sensei angry. Sure enough, after Enosaka Toshiomi heard it, the haze between his eyebrows gathered again. It was taken by others. I was too careless. I didn't expect that in addition to the world's first snake fossil, there would be a holy relic that could make the most ancient king appear. Enosaka Toshiomi said rather angrily. However, this is also expected. Calm down. But in an instant, Enosaka Toshiomi calmed down. After all, the Enosaka family's motto was to always be elegant. However, Yen Fengkiri had a feeling that Enosaka Toshiomi was holding on. That's right. Teacher has successfully summoned another king. Yen Feng and Chili flattered from the side. However, Enosaka Toshiomi's expression at the moment was somewhat helpless. In an instant, brown particles appeared. Ryder dispelled his spiritual form and stood beside Enosaka Toshiomi. I know, you are disappointed to summon me. Ryder's dull voice came. No. How could that be, my king? Toshiomi Inaka bowed to Ryder. After all, your original target was the ancient king. I'm nothing compared to the ancient king. I can't even compare to my rival, the one from the Macedonian kingdom, Ryder said in a low voice, although it seemed like he was belittling himself. Your Majesty. How could Toshiomi Inaka not know? The king in front of him was indeed inferior to the oldest king, and the difference was huge. You don't have to say too much. The only thing I can do is to help you obtain victory in the Holy Grail War and fulfill my own wish of being able to fight against my old enemy once again. After saying that, Ryder's mind went blank as he thought about his formidable enemy. After saying that, Ryder's spirit form disappeared. After noticing that Ryder had left the room, Yen Fengili was slightly puzzled. Teacher, since the king is weak, why did you summon this king? Taking a look at Yen Fengqi, Toshimi turned his head and looked into the distance again. Qi Li, Ryder's combat power is indeed inferior to the ancient king, but don't underestimate him. Toshiomi Inaka maintained his smile. Yen Fengqi Li still didn't understand, but he knew that at least Ryder wasn't as mediocre as his appearance suggested. The most important thing is that Ryder is very obedient. Yen Fengqi Li suddenly understood. Toshiomi Inaka continued to smile as he looked into the distance. The Holy Grail. A Mito residence. In the house that was completely normal, Lancer sat on the sofa and watched TV. After a while, a soft and gentle voice came. That, Sister Anna, the food is ready. Come and eat together. A black-haired lowly with energetic eyes stuck her head out and looked at Lancer, who was sitting on the sofa. The black-haired lowly was Sakura Inaka. Because she was adopted by the Amito family, she changed her name to Sakura Madu. Okay, I know, Anna said faintly and sat at the table with Sakura Madu. Although servants didn't need to eat, Lancer still ate like an ordinary person to make his little master more relaxed. Sakura Madu looked at Lancer, who buried his head in eating, then looked at the command seal on the back of her hand and smiled. I'm so happy to be able to meet Sister Anna, Sakura Madu said. However, the young Sakura Madu didn't notice that Lancer, who was sitting opposite Sakura Madu, was shocked, but he quickly returned to normal. After dinner, Sakura Madu took the initiative to clean up the dishes. Then, Sister Anna, I'll go to the basement later and clean it up, Sakura Madu said softly. This was because Tong Ying had been doing this for the past few days. She had been cleaning the rocks. The basement is full of stones. I'll go to the basement to clean up all the stones. Suddenly, Lancer said, Is that okay? I want to let Sister Anna rest more. Sister Anna saved me. I can do these things. Sister Anna just needs to participate in the Holy Grail War, Sakura Madu said worriedly and then looked at Lancer with a smile. Lancer couldn't help but look at Sakura Madu and remembered the scene when he was summoned. Countless insects were rolling over. A skinny and terrifying old man threw Sakura Madu into the insect pile, and a man struggled to summon a servant. However, Lancer found that he was summoned by Sakura Madu, but the summoning magic was provided by that man. Gagaga. Yenya, I didn't think that your death could be useful. Very well. Then let Sakura fight in your place. The skinny and terrifying old man made a strange laugh. However, swoosh. With the flash of the sword, Sakura Madu, who was not transformed by the insects, found that the squirming insects stopped moving. Suddenly, Tongjing opened her eyes, which had been shut in fright, and looked at the cloaked young lady in front of her. Sister, are you here to save me? Sakura Madu's little face was crying and looked at Lancer blankly. Yes, my name is Anna. Lancer looked at Sakura Madu's crying face and was slightly moved. Gagaga. Unknown servant, I think it's better if you cooperate with me. This way, you and I can get the Holy Grail. The skinny and terrifying old man was obviously a magician, but he was not afraid of the dangerous weapon called servant at all. Lancer glanced at the old man and held Sakura Madu in his arms. Then, the sickle in his hand moved, and the old man was instantly dismembered. Gagaga. Unknown servant, you are indeed strong, but this is my magic workshop. Since you don't want to cooperate, then be devoured by my insects. The old man's hoarse and terrifying voice came from all around. In an instant, countless insects ran out of nowhere and rushed to Lancer. Lancer held Sakura Madu in one hand and covered her face, trying not to let Sakura Madu see these insects. Then, Lancer directly took off the hood of his cloak, and two golden pupils like a horizontal cuboid looked at these insects. In an instant, countless things that were seen by this pair of eyes were petrified. What? Magic eye. And it's a gem? Then in the old man's surprised voice, all the basement was petrified. Gagaga. Do you think you can kill me like this? Too naive. I won't be polite and will take your pair of demonic eyes. Although everything in the basement was petrified, the old man's voice still echoed in the basement. Is that so? Lancer said faintly. Then, He raised the sickle in his hand and slashed at the man who summoned him before.
Ah! What's going on? How did you find me? A fat and disgusting insect fell out of the man's heart.
It had to be said that the servant summoned at the cost of his own life was indeed powerful. Lancer easily sensed something hidden in the dead man's heart.
Goodbye. Lancer looked at the fat insect with his magic eye.
Lancer's calm voice was full of serenity.
No. How can this be? My trace.
The voice stopped abruptly, and the fat insect was petrified. Lancer held Sakura Madu and walked step by step toward the basement door.
Bang!
When he walked near the statue of the fat insect, the statue broke.
Chapter 330.
After coming back to his senses, Lancer glanced at Tanjing.
You don't have to do that anymore. Have a good rest. After all, you are my master.
Lancer said lightly and turned his head away. He didn't dare to look at Sakura Madu.
Sakura Madu froze for a moment, then showed a smile.
I like Anna, Nason the most,
Sakura Madu said and threw herself into Lancer's arms. Lancer hugged Sakura Madu and looked at Sakura Madu's smiling face. He was stunned for a moment and hugged Sakura Madu.
I will protect you, Sakura.
Amiya Mansion. Amiya Kiritsugu cleaned the gun and performed the daily maintenance.
Skillfully disassembled, skillfully installed, and with a few clicks, the gun that was originally disassembled was reassembled. Then, a woman came in.
What's wrong, Mommy? Amiya Kiritsugu asked without looking back.
Mommy could be regarded as his most trusted person, so there was no need to be vigilant. Berserker seems to have found the enemy. It should be assassin.
The woman named Mommy Kyu said. Amiya Kiritsugu frowned.
Although Amiya Kiritsugu didn't want to use this place as a stronghold, it was just a temporary base, but he didn't expect it to be discovered by the enemy servants so quickly. It seems that assassin has a unique ability in detection.
Amiya Kiritsugu stood up. Wuming expressed his helplessness.
He just wanted to come back and have a look. Let Berserker be the bait and see if it can lead the enemy away. Amiya Kiritsugu said and picked up the gun and equipped it.
Yes. Mommy Kyu went out.
Then she looked at the red mark on the back of her hand.
The mark was quite eye-catching. It was 3 strange command seals. Amiya Kiritsugu wore gloves to cover the mark. Soon, Takeo Joyu returned. Did something happen? Amiya Kiritsugu asked.
No, assassin retreated by herself, Takeo Kyu said.
Hurry up and leave this place. Find another base. Amiya Kiritsugu frowned.
Yes.
Amiya Kiritsugu took Kuyu Meimi and the spiritualized berserker to find a new base.
Because he wasn't sure if there was an assassin following them, Amiya Kiritsugu arranged a simple detection technique around them. Although it might not be useful against assassin, it was better than nothing. After taking a break, Amiya Kiritsugu lit a cigarette.
Kiritsugu, madam. Kuyutake said worriedly.
If nothing goes wrong, we'll arrive soon.
Amiya Kiritsugu puffed out a mouthful of smoke.
It was obvious that he was an old smoker.
Then I'll go to the airport to check. Amiya Kiritsugu nodded, and then Takeo Kuyutake left. Only Amiya Kiritsugu was left in the room. It's just that I always have a bad feeling. After a while, Takeo Kuyutake came back anxiously. Not good, Kiritsugu. Something happened to Madam. Amiya Kiritsugu closed his eyes helplessly. At night, Amiya Kiritsugu took Takeo Kuyutake to the beach. According to Takeo Kuyutake's report, Saber came here as soon as they got off the plane. Amiya Kiritsugu came alone to a tall building with a panoramic view of the beach. Takeo Kuyutake lurked near the beach with the spiritualized berserker. Picking up the sniper rifle, Amiya Kiritsugu saw Saber. An unknown black armor covered Saber's whole body, and a faint black mist spread from Saber's body. Only Saber's master, Amiya Kiritsugu's wife, Alice Phil, was missing. Saber is different from before. Ali disappeared. What's going on? Amiya Kiritsugu said rather irritably. Yes, Saber's master was Alice Phil, not Amiya Kiritsugu. The House of Einstein Barons wanted to hire the magician killer Amiya Kiritsugu to carry out this Holy Grail war. Because of money, Amiya Kiritsugu accepted the hire and married into the house of Einstein barons. After a few years of getting along, Amiya Kiritsugu and Alice Phil had sparks of love, and the two had children. However, when summoning servants a few days ago, Alice Phil was suddenly chosen by the Holy Grail, and a stigmata appeared on her hand. Amiya Kiritsugu had been chosen a long time ago, and a stigmata appeared on his hand when he married into the house of Einstein barons. Therefore, the head of the house of Einstein barons, Ahad, let the two of them summon servants together. This could be regarded as cheating. But because of this, the house of Einstein barons had two servants, Saber with the best attributes, and Berserker with the strongest combat power. In this way, Amiya Kiritsugu chose to take Berserker, who was not rational and easy to control, to come to Winterwood in Japan in advance and set up an ambush in advance, and Alice Phil came to Winterwood with Saber later. However, according to Kuyu Mamiya's report, Saber got off the plane alone, and there was no trace of Alice Phil beside her. And Saber also changed from the original Noble Knight King to the current appearance. "Ali, where did you go?" Amiya Kiritsugu murmured. In any case, Amiya Kiritsugu only had one goal, to win the Holy Grail War. Looking at the Night King began to provoke the surrounding servants. One after another servants appeared, and even assassin appeared. In that case, Mamiya, let Berserker also participate in the chaos. Amiya Kiritsugu said to the communication device. After all, Amiya Kiritsugu was not a magician who relied on servants. His goal was the master of these servants. Yes. Kuyu Mamiya's voice came from the other side of the communication device. Because of Amiya Kiritsugu's instructions, Kuyu Mamiya could also command Berserker. Seeing Berserker break into the 6 servants, Amiya Kiritsugu picked up the sniper rifle. Except for those special servants, the servants could not be far away from the master, and the other masters must be hiding in the surroundings, near the beach. What Amiya Kiritsugu wanted to do now was to use the 7 servants to lure out the master's traces. Amiya Kiritsugu, who knew Berserker's strength, was not worried that Berserker would have an accident. At worst, he could use the command seal. After all, Berserker was not rational, and there was no need to use the command seal to contain Berserker. At the same time, Sakura Madu was now hiding inside a container on the beach. Although she was afraid, Sakura Madu still looked at Lancer in the distance through the gap of the door. "You hide inside, no matter what happens, don't come out." This was Lancer's first words to Sakura Madu, and Sakura Madu remembered it firmly. "Anna, Nasen." Sakura Madu anxiously held her small hand with the command seal and said anxiously. Of course, this was for Sakura Madu as a child, but for Kenneth as a magician, it was different. He was very hidden. Kenneth and Sora were in a house not far from the beach, and the owner of the house had been hypnotized by Kenneth. Through the familiar, Kenneth could clearly see the big battlefield of the 7 servants. "Is it really okay to let Castor get involved like this, Kenneth?" Sora naturally also had a familiar, and she could also see the scuffle on the beach. After all, the servants of the other masters have already appeared, and Castor also said that he is suitable for the battlefield. Plus I am the head of the house of Ekipalud, naturally, I can't lose the name of the aristocracy. Kenneth said proudly. "As long as you are happy," Sora said indifferently. Although Castor was indeed handsome, Sora was not the kind of person who would casually fall in love with a dead person. She was a proud noble. At this time, the situation on the battlefield changed. You're tuning in to the Xiaofan's Wuxia Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.